And I can't tell you how many sales organizations, sales professionals, even entrepreneurs approach their prospects from a logical standpoint. Hey, let me give you an ROI on the product, or let me give you the logical case as to why you should be buying this product. In the absence of emotion, it makes it really hard for another human being to make a decision. So yes, what you're communicating is absolutely right. When you understand the meaning, there's going to be some emotion behind it, and that emotion is contagious.
This is the Entrepreneurs United podcast with your hosts, John St. Pierre and Rich Hoffman.
Hey, entrepreneurs, we have a special treat for you with David Kurkjian joining us, who's the founder of Master Messaging. We just had a conversation last week, David, where I think I said, man, you're a Renaissance man. You got like everything going on. Happy to have you on the podcast.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Talk to us about Master Messaging. Why did you pick the name Master Messaging of all names you could select for your business?
It's largely based on the fact that throughout my career, it became obvious that there are instances where business professionals or sales professionals don't really have a clear handle on how to communicate the value of the product or service that they represent. And that shows up in messaging. It could have been master conversation, but it didn't have the same ring as master messaging. So that really was the genesis of the name, is again focusing on helping individual sales professionals, entrepreneurs communicate the value that they represent in the marketplace, and to be able to master that conversation in a way that's going to get the results that they're looking for.
So, David, I'm in the possession of a book you gave to me in Charleston at the Entrepreneurs United Empowerment Experience, 6X, Convert More Prospects to Customers. So thank you for that. When I hold this book in my hand and I hear the question Rich just asked you about master messaging, what is that all about? My big question for you, for our audience to really get grounded, is why did this master messaging and 6X Convert More Prospects to Customers, why is that so important to you, and how did that come to be in your life?
Yeah, the importance comes to the perception of the sales profession. In 35 years of working in corporate America and another 10 years with master messaging, going to networking events, you introduce yourself. Hey, what do you do? I'm in sales. And then I'd see the eye roll. Oh, sales. And, having spent so much time in this profession, it is a honorable profession. It can be a powerful profession. And unfortunately, the world perceives it a little bit differently because you have bad actors out there. So the importance of master messaging and 6X for anybody that goes to our website or that would get the book, one of the things that they're going to walk away with is that sales can be and should be viewed as an opportunity to serve people with the product or service that you represent. And when sales professionals take on that type of intent, and that's the result that they're looking for in the relationships, it's going to change the perception of the sales profession. And so that really is what lives at the heart of the work that we do, is helping sales professionals understand you have an opportunity to serve and impact another human being's life through the product and service that you represent.
So real quick though, David, I guess my question to you is, why you? Why is David the person who has written this book? Give us a little bit of the background and the history of you, yourself, the person.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I shared this with Rich in another conversation. One of the first speeches that I ever gave was actually in a class at Clemson University. And I'm sure, like a lot of people that look at public speaking, they approach it with fear and trepidation. Again, oh my gosh, this is so scary. What I found was that speech class I took unlocked something in me. And part of it was the topic I chose. It was on a book called The Transparency Factor. And it was on the power of when human beings are transparent and vulnerable with other human beings, how that unlocks potential and opportunity for the relationship. But to tie that back into your question, throughout my career, I found that I was very comfortable and energized in front of the room, specifically when I was helping my sales teams or other sales professionals get better at their craft. So what I discovered in myself, the heart of a communicator, the heart of a teacher, the heart of a consultant, to come along sales professionals and entrepreneurs and again, help them in the way that they're communicating their values. It's something that is in me. that I identified as I walked throughout my career and realized, hey, the biggest expression of this really would happen if I started my own company and had the freedom to serve companies and sales organizations 100% instead of just doing that as a part of my role in corporate America.
You said something about sales being an honorable profession, and I believe that that statement has a juxtaposition to it, which is some people see it as a dishonorable profession. For those who are in sales, how would one know that they treat the profession dishonorably? And then how would one know that they are treating it honorably? How do they know they're on the right side of this?
It really comes to the intent that the person brings to the relationship that they're building with a prospect or a customer. If the intent is purely to consummate a sale, to notch a sale, to reduce quota, to earn a commission, all of those things are important. I'm not minimizing those. But if that's your end goal, if that's the intent in the relationship is to just get money in a transaction from another human being, then you are behaving dishonorably in the sales profession. For those that want to identify if they are behaving honorably, this would probably happen. This would be a scenario that would play out. It's when a prospect looks at you and says, for whatever reason, no, I'm not going to move forward. And the sales professional feels a sense of loss for that person because they're not going to get the benefit. They're not going to get the value of the product that salesperson represents. So they're experiencing more of a loss for the other person, not the fact that they didn't close the sale. So those would be some characteristics that you would look for as far as dishonorable versus honorable.
When you're talking to someone who's a potential prospective client of yours, can you run us through what are some of the typical things that you might say? Like we all have maybe a bit of a talk track that's, hey, let me tell you a little bit about what I do. Let me also give you a sample of what I do. We do that because we know there's something in what we say that we hope is going to represent what we do or potentially be impressive. Can you give us some of that talk track so that we can feel like a potential client of yours in the moment?
Well, so one of the lines that you would hear me say in a conversation is that we help our clients and sales organizations unlock the hidden value of the products and services that they represent. That is a demonstration of what we teach sales professionals. What you just heard is an excellent example because the focus is on an outcome for the prospect. What I could have said was, oh, well, Master Messaging is a sales consultancy and we create custom playbooks, we facilitate workshops, we do keynotes, we do ongoing coaching. It's all we, and I. And it's not really focused on an outcome or what's in it for the person that I would be having a conversation with. So even the communication of what we do, it's going to come back to the outcome that we create for our clients. And that's, again, unlocking the hidden value they represent in the marketplace.
So, in the idea of answering the question, well, what do? You add to that question and really answer, what do you do for others? Versus the average salesperson would talk about how they do it rather than what do you do for others. Is that right?
That's perfect. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. What are some other typical mistakes that an average salesperson might make that someone who you have trained would not make?
One would be sharing way too much information. The things that we teach and consult around are largely based on behavioral psychology, or more specifically, how human beings come to a decision when they're presented with a buying opportunity. One of the behavioral psychology principles that's so important for a sales professional is that in the volume of a lot of information, the most important things get lost. So it's up to the sales professional to identify what are the three most important things that I want a prospect to remember in a conversation. And then as they're building out an outline for the conversation, or as they're executing the conversation, they need to constantly keep asking themselves this question. Is what I'm getting ready to say going to support one of these three things? Because if it's not, don't say it. And the reason that sales professionals have a tendency to share way too much information is a hormone called dopamine. When we meet somebody for the very first time, i.e., sales professional meeting a prospect, we're most comfortable as a human being when we're talking about things that we're knowledgeable and passionate about. And the reason for that is dopamine. Dopamine is a short-term feel-good hormone. So when we're talking about the product or service that we represent and we're all excited because we're passionate about it, we're knowledgeable about it, dopamine starts dripping on our brain and it causes us to share even more. So it can lead to a drug-induced feature dump. And then the other one goes back to something that you heard me say earlier in our conversation, and that is the focus of the conversation is all about the product, service, company, salesperson. That's going to show up in the language where you hear a lot of I and we. And it's definitely going to show up where the salesperson's intent is wrong. Going back to what we were just discussing, it's more about consummating a sale than helping another human being solve a problem in their world. Those are some of the challenges and additional mistakes that sales professionals may be experiencing.
You reference behavioral psychology principles, and I know that's something you're really good at and you apply in sales and you do that ethically. What would be a few more behavioral psychology principles that you put into play or you believe others should really be aware of?
Central to the sales professional's role or job is the ability to communicate value specific to the product or service that they represent. And it's interesting, in 12 years of doing this, having worked with over 200 companies, I always ask the same question. Hey, sales professionals, do you got to communicate unique value? And they're like, well, yeah, of course. And then I ask this question. From a scientific behavioral psychology standpoint, how is it that human beings perceive value? And I've only gotten 3 right answers in having asked over 200 organizations. And it's telling because, again, there's not a salesperson that's walking on this planet that would disagree with they have to communicate value. But why is it that so few of us understand how the person that we're having a conversation with actually perceives value? Now, I'll hear answers like, oh, it's all about the cost to benefit. And yes, that's part of the equation. Or it's all about the outcome or the problem you solve. Yes, that's part of the equation. But they never land on the exact combination of how human beings perceive value. And it came out of the work that Daniel Kahneman was just brilliant at. He was a behavioral psychologist, specifically in the world of economics and marketing. And he unlocked and found how human beings perceive value. It's in a contrasting worldview. So sales professionals need to think of it this way. Value is perceived when you communicate to a prospect, hey, this is what your world looks like today without my product, contrasted with this is what your world could look like with my product. And it's in the side-by-side comparison of those two worlds that people perceive value. Now, here's a real easy example. I live in Atlanta. Atlanta gets very hot in the summertime. And if I spend any amount of time, it could be doing yard work, it could be, running, exercise, 95 degrees outside, 100% humidity, and I walk into an air-conditioned building. That's instant contrast, which is why we spend so much money on air conditioning. But it's also why I wouldn't want to be an air-conditioned salesperson in Alaska. There'd be no contrast. So it's up to the salesperson to build that contrast into the conversations that they're having with their prospects so that their prospects understand the value.
Well, and having been the beneficiary of your training, I believe one of the ways you recommend doing that is asking someone, what would it be like if you were able to experience X to help the prospective client visualize what would things look like with your product or service? Does that land as, did I nail a piece of what I've learned from you, or can you adjust that to be more accurate?
It would be more, what if you could?
What if you could?
You could say, what would it look like? But part of the painting a picture of what their world would look like with your product or service, the challenge is that you have to stay away from talking about your product or service. So I'll give you an example with the work that we've done with CertaPro. CertaPro could say, what if you could have a team of professional painters accomplish whatever project that you're looking for on time and on budget. Well, that reference to accomplished team of painters, they're talking about themselves. They're not talking about the prospect. And so if you go from talking about, hey, this is what your world looks like today, to, hey, here's what we do, you lose the contrast. So it really should be more of, what if you could more effectively manage your budget? What if you had the peace of mind of knowing that this project is going to be done on time? What if you had more time freedom to focus on other aspects of your job? Those are all relevant and powerful value position statements for a CertaPro representative, because they're painting a picture of how the prospects world is going to be different without talking about all the things that they do.
Love that. And I love the idea of, you talk a lot about sharing things in stories and how we all capture things in stories, right? And how you can give somebody that particular example of what their life looks like without your product and what it could look like with, and putting it into story format that they can visualize. David, anybody who knows me knows that my favorite TED Talk of all time, Mr. Simon Sinek, Start With Why. And you have almost a chapter dedicated to that concept. And even as Rich was asking you, like, what it is that you do and how do you do it? I mean, you basically went through your why, how, and what as a company through this short conversation already. And I actually literally, before I even got to this section, I was, oh, okay, now I got your why, your how. Okay, got it. But you also talk about means, does, is, and how to take that golden circle that Simon Sinek talks about. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you've not seen the TEDx video or TED Talks video, Simon Sinek Start With Why, please go see that as a combination with this podcast. But you take that golden circle of why, how, what, and you put it in the words of means, does, is. Can you please walk us through that?
Simon did a brilliant job of breaking down why some companies have success in a commoditized market by using a very simple 3-circle diagram. So it's is, does, means. There's a comparable golden circle in the sales world. Simon focused on success for a company being clear about their why. If a salesperson is going to be successful in their role, they have to be clear about what it means, what the product means to a prospect. So means lives in the center, just like why, and then does, and then is. And just like Simon pointed out in his TED Talk, that there are so many companies out there that know what they do and how they do it, but they don't know why they're doing it. They don't have a clear why. There's so many salespeople out there that they know what their product is and what it does, but they don't really focus on what it means to the person they're building a relationship with. So it creates the same lack of success you see in the business world that's not clear with why, when salespeople aren't clear about what it means to a prospect. Can I give you a quick example?
Please, I was going to ask for one.
Okay. I was at a networking event not that long ago, and one of the common questions you ask somebody when you meet them is, hey, who are you? What do you do? Which, by the way, are terrible questions because it pigeonholes the person into talking about what they did. But in this moment, I said, who are you and what do you do? He goes, my name's John. I'm a business development rep, and I work for a data warehouse. And I was like, oh, business development rep. That's not an easy job. And he's like, no, it's not. And I said, how do you do it? And he goes, I get up every day and I've got a certain number of calls I got to make and I got to send cold emails out. And I said, yeah, it's really hard. He goes, yeah. And I said, so let me ask you a little different question. I said, the prospects that you're reaching out to, how are they going to be better off as a result of doing business with you? And I said, when you answer that question, try and answer it without saying anything about the data warehouse. And he goes, well, that's different. I said, yeah, I know it's a different question, but give it some thought. And he goes, okay, they would have more peace of mind. I said, why peace of mind? And he said, because we have 99.9999% redundancy in our data warehouse. If they give us their data, they don't have to worry about it. So they'll have peace of mind. I said, okay, what else? And he goes, time freedom. I said, really? Why time freedom? And he said, because they're giving us a portion of their IT department that they no longer have to manage. And so they can take their team and focus on more important things to serve their clients. And I said, let me make sure I get this straight. You're having a hard time picking up the phone and offering them peace of mind and time freedom in a world where we have little of that. And he goes, I wasn't thinking of it that way. I said, that's the right way to think about it, because now you're getting clear about what this means to another human being. And it's going to give you the ability to interact with them with a much higher level of passion, energy, because now your thinking is, wow, I can bring this to another human being. And you're not thinking, I'm just selling data warehouse space, just selling rack space. That would be a great example of being clear about the meaning of your product or service for the people that you're building relationships with.
Yeah, I love that. Dude, this kind of brings me to the thought of the number of people. And Rich, I might put you in this box at one point in your career. But the number of people I've heard over my life say, I'm not a salesperson. I'm not good at sales. I'm not a salesperson. But inevitably, when they believe in something, when they truly, truly believe in what they're doing, what their product means, they could be the best salesperson that exists because they really believe. And then on the contrary, when they don't believe what their product really means or their service really means, they're not very good at sales because they don't have as much passion or juice for the product or service. Is that maybe the way that you're articulating it? You really need to know what it means, because if you don't believe in what your product is good for your people, it's not honorable. You're just doing it for the paycheck or the commission. Is that the right way to look at it?
Yeah, and it also taps into another behavioral psychology principle. If you understand what your product means to another human being, you're going to bring some emotion to that conversation. And again, this is another behavioral psychology principle. Two different Italian scientists proved this, one in 2002 and one in 2003, that human beings make decisions based on meaning and emotion, and then justify it with logic and reason. Hmm. And I can't tell you how many sales organizations, sales professionals, even entrepreneurs approach their prospects from a logical standpoint. Hey, let me give you an ROI on the product, or let me give you the logical case as to why you should be buying this product. In the absence of emotion, it makes it really hard for another human being to make a decision. So yes, what you're communicating is absolutely right. When you understand the meaning, there's going to be some emotion behind it. And that emotion is contagious. When you're communicating with another human being and you're experiencing emotion in that moment, it's absolutely contagious. The person you're communicating with will feel the same way.
One of the ways to communicate emotion is to get clear on the meaning of what you do, express that, help that other person see the contrasting worldview that your product or service could provide that really gives them the things that are meaningful to you. So all of that I get in the context of a conversation, let's say one-on-one with you and I. Mm-hmm. But let's say there's another decision maker in the event of a home services sale or a business to business sale. A home services would be there's a spouse. A business to business sale, there's another partner. So with the absent decision maker, how do you go about creating some emotion in that? Because I'd imagine with the present decision maker, it's much easier to engage them in the emotion, and they make a decision, they back it up with logic. They then go to the absent decision maker and explain the logic. And their absent decision maker is not emotionally invested in the same way. And they say, I don't know if that's a good idea. How do you go about transferring that emotion to the absent decision maker?
Well, it still comes back to outcomes. One of the interesting things about the perception of value, even though it's the same mechanism that happens in every human being's brain, that contrasting worldview, the output of that is going to be unique to the individual. And so you have to be mindful as a sales professional as to who you're speaking to in building that contrasting worldview. So if this were a home services sales rep, then you're going to have to identify what are the challenges that you're going to help solve for that person, and then what's their world going to look like by doing business with you, and then equip the person that is going to take that message with that very simple story. So again, I'll give you an example. I've used this principle and concept in the relationship with my wife. We've been married 38 years. There was a time where I wanted to purchase a big green egg. If you know anything about the big green eggs, they're expensive, right? And the first two passes at a $1,200 expense for, out on our deck, my wife was no, no. That's because I wasn't using the principles and techniques that I teach. We were finally sitting outside on the deck, and the conversation went something like this, honey, man, you've got two businesses and your schedule is just absolutely jacked. I'd love to help. So if you didn't have to cook meals 3 or 4 nights a week, you would be able to focus a lot more time on other things that would be important to you. And so I would love to make that happen. The shortest path to making that happen is a big green egg, because I'll take responsibility for cooking 3 or 4 meals. I didn't get finished with the conversation. She was like, okay, yes, you can do that. It really is the salesperson understanding who's involved. If it's, a husband, wife, and you're speaking to the wife, obviously there are going to be some things that you can communicate in that conversation that are going to create contrast for her and value for her. But you also need to equip her with a simple conversation she could have with her husband to communicate that same meaning and emotion.
I understand this idea of intent. If your intent is just to collect money, you're on the wrong side of it. If your intent is to serve, you're on the right side of it. That I understand. That sounds very simple, very practical. Then I kind of ground this with a bit of the example that you just gave and go, at what point are you on the wrong side of it because you know what you want as an outcome? And you are literally changing, one could say manipulating, how you talk about it to be attractive to the other person to get to an outcome you desire. So at what point does that become, yeah, you've kind of crossed the line? Or do you go, actually, that's just being really thoughtful in how you talk about things. You're putting yourself in the other person's shoes. Like you never really crossed the line. Where is that? Is this
Yeah,
all
so
from a serving place, or is there a line of like, you're actually just manipulating things because you know you need to pitch it to them with what's in their best interest in mind, and you're actually kind of excluding your own needs? Like, how does that get in a values way kind of negotiated to be on the right side of that?
Well, I think it really comes down to who do you care about the most in that relationship. I didn't sit down and have this internal talk track. She said no 2 or 3 times because this happened over a period of time. It was several months. So it wasn't me sitting down going, I'm going to manipulate her by using the things that I teach sales.
You didn't architect your principles with the storyline for your wife.
No, it was really me paying attention to what was going on in my wife's world and seeing how stressed she was and how she's been carrying this responsibility for cooking for us for a long time, coupled with watching my daughter and son-in-law, who have 5 kids, cook meals during the week that are very creative and diverse. And I'm sitting there going, I've got time. I'm not near as stressed as my wife, and I'm also not near as time consumed as my daughter and son-in-law. This is something I need to step into and do. And so it was a confluence of those things that led me to the conversation where I used the principles, but it was still based on helping my wife. That was actually more important than me getting a big green egg.
So it comes back to this idea of intent. And it really is that simple that if
Mm-hmm.
you care more about serving the other person than you are serving yourself, then you can feel okay changing how you talk about something to be what you genuinely perceive to be in their best interest. That's not manipulative, that has their best intent in mind. And you can feel okay about doing that.
And, one of the traps that salespeople fall into that make it difficult for them to adopt this mindset, I call it the absence of a $1 million mindset. What I mean by that is they feel like they need the prospect to do something for them. I need this sale, or, I need these sales. And if I don't get them, then I feel this loss, as opposed to there's more than enough opportunity out there for me. And if somebody doesn't understand the value and how I can serve them with my product, I'm going to be disappointed for them, but I'm not going to project onto them, I need you. The worst example of this in my career, I was leading a sales team of salespeople that were selling digital x-ray. And I'm dealing with a office manager for a large dental practice. And she goes, David, I've so enjoyed the conversation with you. I'm going to fax you something that I got from a competing salesperson. She faxed it to me, and it was a flyer for an award trip for the sales team of that other company. The sales rep actually sent the flyer and said, hey, I need your sale so that I can qualify for this award trip and be recognized inside of my company. The intent was 100% for the sales rep. That represents some of the mindset of sales professionals that are behaving badly.
What are some other principles in this $1 million mindset? One of them I'm hearing is that you're not going to project that you need them. I'm assuming there's a piece of, hey, I don't need the work. I don't need the money. What are other things that you want to make sure you either do project or don't project to have that $1 million mindset?
It really comes from a position of confidence and conviction around your ability to help another human being. Going back to the $1 million mindset, here's a practical thing that I've shared with sales professionals. When you're looking at a prospect list, make it as big and as expansive as you can. Now, if there's only 10 people out there that you can sell to, it's going to be hard to adopt this $1 million mindset. Because when number one says no, you're like, oh, I've only got 9 left. But if you've got 1,000, 2,000, or look at the potential marketplace and see a sea of opportunity, it takes the pressure off of, I got to have this one. This is one that I absolutely need. And it's going to take a minute. Again, I'm not 100% following my own advice. There are times when somebody says no to master messaging where I feel I kind of take it personally. I feel a little bit of a hit. But for the most part, the mindset that I'm able to bring is, wow, that makes me sad because I'm not going to be able to help you.
Isn't there a typical sales mindset of, if I land the sale, it's a win for the salesperson and a win for the client.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't land the sale, it's a loss. And who wants to lose? And it's a loss for the client and it's a loss for the salesperson. So is that in the healthy area of a sales mindset, to treat it as a win-lose proposition? And when someone doesn't decide to go with you, you do feel like you lost. Maybe one of the things you lost is you didn't communicate well enough for them to understand your value. Is that win-lose proposition in the sales mindset in the healthy realm or the not so healthy realm?
Healthy as long as it's a equal distribution of that loss. In other words, if the salesperson's just sitting there going, wow, I lost, and they're not even considering what the prospect lost in that equation, that would not be healthy. But absolutely healthy for both parties. Well, I feel a loss because I'm not able to serve the person in a way that I'm accustomed to, and then feel bad for that person because they're going to lose out on the ability to solve a problem with the product or service that I represent. So yeah, I think there's a healthy way to look at that.
All right, best 3 meals you've made on the green egg.
Best 3 meals. Nothing quite as good as a seared steak, a New York strip, coated in peppercorns. And one of the reasons why you can get such a really good steak on a green egg is because of the high temperature. It'll go every bit of 750, 800 degrees. And the key to a amazing steak is getting that quick sear on both sides. Beyond that, it's going to be pulled pork and ribs, which is a go-to for a family event. Our family now is 18 as far as adult children, grandchildren. During the summer, that's one of the more popular requests. Hey, Dad, some pulled pork and ribs. And then number 3, pizza. Once I learned how to do it right. The challenge with the green egg is that you can't see into it. And when you're cooking a pizza, like a wood fire pizza, you don't want to keep opening the grill. The very first time I cooked a pizza, I had all the amazing toppings on it. I followed the recipe to a T, let it cook at 650 for 10 minutes. When I opened the lid, it was a charred piece of nothingness on the pizza stone. And what I didn't realize is that different dough require different temperatures. So once I solved that, pizza on the big green egg is absolutely amazing.
Love it. Why did you challenge yourself to go to a comedy class? And what is it that every sales professional could potentially benefit from if they were to attend similar classes to what you did?
Well, it's going to come down to public speaking. Obviously, I've spent the majority of my adult life in some way, shape, or form public speaking. And I love stand-up comics. Absolutely love stand-up comics. Nate Bargatze, Gaffigan. I mean, there are a number of very clean comics out there that I absolutely love. And as I'm watching them, I'm going, that's brilliant that you can stand up in front of the room and intentionally make people laugh. And it led me over the last few years to start asking the question, can I do that? Now, I think most people listening to this would understand it's a very uncomfortable thing to put yourself out there and stand in front of 200 people and start executing jokes because you're like, will they laugh? I don't know if they're going to laugh. And if they don't laugh, oh my goodness, and then you're going to really feel terrible. So really, I stepped into it as a challenge for myself to push myself in the area of public speaking and see if I could stand up in front of the room and make people laugh, and found that I could. Now, the benefit for sales professionals, it's just going to give you another area of content that you can lean into in your speaking skills. And by the way, if you take a comedy class, it will absolutely push you through that barrier of fear of standing up in front of people and communicating in a way that would make them laugh. Bottom line, it's going to help your public speaking ability if you take a comedy class.
Guys, you heard it here first. I have an idea. October 2025, the Entrepreneurs United Empowerment Experience, we are going to do a comedy class with our entrepreneurs. I love it. And it's going to be headlined by David starting up on the front and giving us his show. What a great exercise in transparency and vulnerability and being okay with failure. Erin Deal, who we also had this year in Charleston, right, is a former improv comedian. And, she would talk about getting comfortable with failure, learning, progressing, and developing. Maybe we got to test ourselves on that, Rich, as
I like it.
Go to comedy school. David, this has been awesome. Thank you very much for your time here today. I would encourage everybody to go take a look at 6X, convert more prospects to customers. How else can people get more information, David, from you, if they want to learn more about what you do and help sales reps and organizations?
Certainly connect with me on LinkedIn. I drop articles and content on LinkedIn, or you can go to our website at mastermessaging.com. I did start a podcast at the beginning of the year, and there's some good content, good interviews there with sales leaders for people to experience as well.
Great. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Stay tuned as John and Rich unpack today's conversation.
Rich, I'm curious as to what response you'd have to this question. What percentage of lost sales are due to, quite honestly, the competitor had better features and benefits or better pricing or better whatever to satisfy the homeowner's needs, or the psychology of the sale?
My feeling would be the psychology of the sale. And the reason I feel that way is I think there are plenty of products and services out there that are not communicated very well. Now, there are also plenty of products and services out there that don't deliver what they actually promise. I actually think there are more high quality products and services out there, especially in small businesses. People either don't know how to communicate well, or aren't confident in communicating, or just communicate it poorly. For whatever reason, they're not using the psychology of how to talk about what they offer and how it serves other people.
If you're losing 50% of the sales because you don't bring the right emotion and mindset to the equation, and you don't really believe you're serving your customer, that comes through. And I have seen over and over and over again, sales representatives who are not experiencing success. They don't truly believe in what they're doing. They don't truly believe they are serving the customer. They're doing it to hit the quota, and inevitably they are not successful. It's a really sucky place to be in. But if you truly believe that if your customer doesn't see the perceived value in your thing, it's their loss. That's how much you believe in what you're doing. Sales becomes very easy because that emotion just comes rushing through and your success ratio goes way up.
I didn't ask David, but I in hindsight would like to have. What's the difference between the $1 million mindset and an abundance mindset? They seem very similar. You would think in an abundance mindset with sales, the abundance would be, I don't need the sale. I don't need the work. I don't need the money. I'm here to serve. There's certainly more literature out there. There are more videos out there about an abundance mindset than the $1 million sale mindset. That's niche-y in a cool way that he mentioned. But I think if people want to learn more about this $1 million mindset, I think it would be easy to go to an abundance mindset and apply much of that to selling.
It's interesting. So when he said the absence of $1 million mindset is one of the problems that sales reps experience,
which would be a scarcity mindset, I think.
Yes, I literally wrote down on my page, desperate versus abundant. And so the fact that you brought up abundant as well, but I think it's a very tricky thing, Rich, because there is this premise in sales management, at least, that you want your sales reps to be hungry. You don't want them to feel this sense of abundance and they have all the sales they need for the year. They're not hungry then to hit their quota. There is a psychology of sales management that needs to come into the equation here. But I think what he's more referring to in this particular point is when you are with a customer, if you reek of desperation, you're never getting the sale.
Who needs who?
But if you have that mindset of I'm here to serve you, and there's a lot of people in this street, there's a lot of people in this town that I want to go serve, and you truly believe that what your product means to that person is really going to get them the value that exists, you have that little bit of that $1 million mindset he's talking about, which is you're not desperate. You feel like there's a lot more leads out there. He talked about having an abundance of leads as an example, is one way to make sure you have this $1 million mindset. So you're not just stuck to 10 leads, you have thousands of leads you can go after. You can serve all these different people. I really appreciate the way that came through.
Well, I'm going to take a quick opportunity to speak for you and put you in the same bucket I am. You're welcome to disagree. But I think we could both probably walk out of this conversation with David and start doing a better job talking about what do we do for others. When somebody asks, what do you do? To answer, what do you do for others and what do others experience as a result of you doing it well? And not immediately turn that conversation to what do you actually do and who do you do it for? But it really talk in the perspective of what do you do for other people? How do they experience it? The benefit they get. That's what I do. I think we could both probably immediately turn that around. Today, we could start practicing that better, using that differently.
If you want to hear more of David and the things that he brings to the table, well, you should have been in Charleston at the Entrepreneurs United Empowerment Experience, or you can come next year in October 2025, the Entrepreneurs United Empowerment Experience. You can go to entrepreneursunited.us. And if you like this episode with David, please give us a review on this podcast, subscribe to the episodes, and we hope to see you again soon on the Entrepreneurs United podcast.